people talk about the annexation of Crimea as if Russia decided to one day just take some Ukrainian territory. But what they almost never talk about is the other side to that story. And that is the violence that was taking place in Ukraine prior to Russia's annexation of Crimea. They don't talk about the fact that members of the Crimean police, called the Berkut, were injured and killed in clashes with Maidan rioters. The fact that you did indeed have Ukrainian neo-Nazis and many ultra-nationalists and Banderists in the Euromaidan movement. The fact that the commandant of the Euromaidan was a hardcore Ukrainian nationalist and Banderist by the name of Andrei Parubi. All of these things terrified the ethnic Russians living in Crimea and also living in Donbas. And then there was also bloodshed that took place near an area called Korsun. And what took place was a large number of Russians from Crimea decided to get on buses and travel to Kiev to join the counter-Maidan protesters. 8 buses left from Crimea, went to Kiev, and on their way back, their caravan was ambushed by right sector militants. And for those of you who don't know, Right Sector was a hardcore neo-Nazi, ultra-nationalist militant organization. And they ambushed the buses, they ambushed the caravans, and they beat people up. They forced some of the men to strip their clothes off and force them to press their knees against glass on the ground, and then coerce them to sing the Ukrainian national anthem as the right sector militants screamed, Herodium Slava, glory to the heroes. And I'm pretty certain that, if I had to guess, I'm pretty certain that there were some Slav Ukrainas being said as well. And they even killed people in their ambush of this anti-Maidan caravan. After hours of these people being forced to be in this very hostile environment, they were eventually allowed to go back to Crimea. And they went back to Crimea and they told everyone that they knew about what happened. They told everybody that they knew what happened. And people were absolutely disturbed by this. They were utterly disturbed by the fact that Nazis attacked their people, attacked their fellow Russians, and put them through torture, abuse, both physical and psychological, and even killed some of the people in that caravan. People in Crimea were also disturbed by the fact that members of their police force, the Berkut, were also injured and killed in clashes with the Euromaidan nationalists. So members of the Crimean police force were killed, and their fellow Russians were ambushed, beaten up, tortured, humiliated, and killed as they were trying to get back to Crimea from a counter-Maidan protest in Kiev. So they saw this and they were horrified by this. Crimean Russians began to set up roadblocks. They began to set up checkpoints. And eventually, enough of the people there pledged allegiance not to Kiev, but to Moscow. And Russia eventually annexed Crimea. Now, you could say that Russia capitalized on the grievances of the people there, the grievances and the legitimate fears of the people there, and I would say that that is a fair point and a fair observation to make. But even so, let's say that, for argument's sake, that is accurate, that Putin capitalized on the grievances and the fears of his fellow Russians in Crimea. Those fears were legitimate. Those concerns, that anger, that consternation upon hearing about your fellow Russians being humiliated and killed by Nazis, that was all real and legitimate. And people could hear that story and they could think, well, these people were crazy. But I think that they weren't crazy. I think they most definitely had legitimate concerns. And especially looking at how the commandant of the Maidan was a Banderas, looking at how the right sector and other Banderas got empowered. They got this sense of empowerment in the midst of the Maidan and the whole political atmosphere that came with. It was a scary political climate to be in, especially given the history of Ukrainian nationalists and how they butchered Russians and Poles and other people during the Second World War. The reason why we would think those ethnic Russians were crazy is because we as Americans have become greatly desensitized to violence. We have become greatly desensitized to murder and to cruelty. Because truly, we should all be disturbed by just one murder in our society. But we're not. Every single day, many people are murdered in the United States. And we don't hear about most of them. And when we do hear about these murders taking place, we just say, oh, well, people die every day, or it's a tragedy, but oh well. But we really don't have any sort of real deep emotional reaction to this dark reality. We really don't. A great indication of this is how we have treated capital punishment in the United States. The fact that really less than 1% of all murderers in America are actually sentenced to death, and the fact that most of the people in death row in this country don't even reach execution, but actually die because of natural causes. That really tells us that we really don't take horrendous murder very seriously. We really don't take sadistic, cruel, evil, sinister, brutal murder seriously. We don't. Because we have an entire system, an entire legal system where lawyers can come and they can appeal for people on death row. And that person who may have that person who has done a horrific crime, like raping a 9-year-old girl and then strangling her to death with a shoestring, he will never see punishment. He will just sit in a cell and, have physical recreation and hang out with his inmates, and then he'll just die. It's early retirement for him because his entire life is dependent on government funds, and his breakfast and his lunch and dinner are paid for by the state. That's not justice. There was another example that I heard, I read about from the 2014 Ukrainian situation, and that was in Donbas. The people in Donbas were horrified upon seeing the rise of Banderists and neo-Nazis and people who were members of right sector. They were horrified by this. And one event that really grabbed the attention of the people of Donbas was something that took place in the city of Odessa in a trade union building. There was a nationalist protest, and then it was a Euromaidan protest. There were the pro-Maidan activist protesters, and then on the other side, there were the anti-Maidan, the counter-protesters, really the counter-revolutionaries. And eventually, there was a big clash. People died, and the Maidan protesters pushed the counter protesters, the counter revolutionaries, pushed them away, and then eventually funneled them into a building. It was it's called the Trade Union Building, And they did not allow these people to exit the building, and eventually the building was caught on fire. People who managed to escape the building were beaten up or were even shot, or people were prevented from leaving by the neo-Nazis who shot at them. And those people burned alive. The building was set on fire, and those people were cooked alive. It was a massacre, and dozens of people were murdered. And they were Ukrainian nationalists online saying things like, oh, look, cooked orcs or whatever, using derogatory words for Russians. And the people of Odessa, the people of Donbas, were so disturbed by this that they revolted. That was one of the reasons why they revolted against Kiev. They said, oh, look, Nazis are rising up. You have a Nazi that's to come on down for the Maidan. You have violence against our people. And so they revolted. And we can say, well, those people were crazy. Those people were crazy to be so horrified by this violence to the point that they would not want to be under Kiev. But the reality is that I don't think they're crazy. The reality is that those people had a collective, deeply emotional reaction to murder. And there was an Athenian lawmaker in ancient times. His name was Solon. And Solon said something like, a healthy society will have, and I'm not quoting this verbatim, but he said something to the likes of, a healthy society will have basically a collective anger towards injustice against one of its members. Something like that. And Robert Blecker, who wrote a book on the death penalty, he puts this quote up to show ancient wisdom about this this very important thing that we, I think, should understand, and we really don't. And most of us, I think, not most, but a lot of us, enough of us, reject this wisdom to the point where true justice is not even being enacted. A few days ago, a few days ago, what's wrong with my memory? Last night, I was watching a cop video on YouTube. It came out a few days ago. So it was a video of an event that took place recently. There was a cop video, and the video was of police officers shooting a guy, killing him, after he literally shot at random people who were stopping their cars at a stop sign. Just shot at them randomly. And he went on this very, very loud tirade about how he was tired of whatever. This guy takes a gun, and from his house, he starts shooting at random cars. And there was a woman who was in a van. The van stopped at a stop sign, and boom, a bullet hits the windshield, and she was injured, and then eventually she died. And I think there was another guy who was also injured, who was injured but didn't die. But this poor woman died. I think her name was Alicia Hall. And I couldn't get this video off of my mind. After watching it, and even today, I can't get this video off of my mind. I'm just thinking, being in a car, driving from some regular task, a job, the grocery store, a restaurant, meeting a friend, something like that, and you stop at a stop sign in your neighborhood, you're about to get to your house, park into your driveway, and a bullet hits your windshield and you're dead. I couldn't get this off of my mind. And it wasn't just the fact that somebody shot somebody, it was also the fact that, which is tragic enough, but it was also the fact that somebody was shot and killed in their car thinking they were going to go home. Not expecting anything like this to happen. Coming back from work, coming back from school, coming back from some regular daily happening, and a bullet hits this person's windshield, and the woman dies just like that. And it made me think about several things. One is how your life could end when you least expect it. And secondly, how we are really not safe. I mean, we go to the store, we don't think we're going to be killed. We go to the mall, or who goes to malls anymore? But we go to places, we don't expect to be killed. But we live in a society where that can actually happen. You could just be driving in your car and boom, somebody shoots you. And we've had so many shootings in America. And America has the largest concentration of mass shootings in the world. We have the largest concentration of school shootings. And I understand. You can tell me about Nicaragua. You can tell me about Honduras. And yes, those areas are violent. They have higher murder rates than we do. Brazil has a higher murder rate than the United States does. And those countries have their own problems. But I'm talking about the United States. I'm talking about America. I'm not talking about Nicaragua or whatever. Those countries have their problems. But America also has its own problems. And we have too much violence in this country, to the point where people are being shot at randomly in their cars. And this is not the first time that something like this has happened. We have shootings in theaters, school shootings, university shootings. And I mean, I've had people call me up and say, Ted, there was a shooting today. And it's like, that's horrific. But the person calling me up and telling me about it, the way he sounds, he doesn't sound that disturbed by it. But it is horrifically disturbing. I mean, a few years ago, we had a shooting at a Walmart. Some guy wanted to kill Mexicans. Went into a Walmart and just killed 20-something people. Just like that. Just like that. Going to Walmart. We don't live in a safe society. We don't. We do not live in a safe society. People say, oh, you should go out more. You should get out of your house. Why? Why do you want to get out of your house? This is a crazy-ass society. It's insane. But we don't have a real deep emotional reaction as a collective against these things. We don't. So that's why we'll look at the people in Crimea or the people in Donbas and we would laugh at them. Oh, look, 40-something people were burned to death in a building in Odessa. Well, things happen. But the people of Russia the people of Donbas got upset about this. And we would say, oh, they're crazy. But they're not crazy. In the Bible, there is a story of a woman who is raped to death. It's in the book of Judges, and in this book, in the Bible, it has the most graphic story probably ever recorded in the Old Testament, and it's a woman being raped to death. It's horrific. And that one murder got 11 tribes of Israel because the murderers, the rapists and murderers, they were of the tribe of Benjamin. And the rest of the tribes of Israel got together and they went to the elders of Benjamin and they said, listen, hand over the murderers. And the elders of Benjamin said, we're not going to do that. And that one act of injustice and the protection of the murderers, which was also an act of injustice, was justification enough for the tribes of Israel to literally invade Benjamin. We would look at that and say, oh, that's crazy. That's crazy. The people of Israel are crazy. But they weren't. They weren't crazy. Because as a collective, we must be angry against these things. But we don't have that anger anymore. We really don't. We really don't give a damn. We don't care. I don't think we really care that much. We hear about what Ted... I mean, I can't tell you how many women I've seen interested in serial killers. I mean, not in a romantic way, although that may be underneath the surface, but they're interested in serial killers in the sense that they want to watch documentaries about them and read books about them, and it's like, why are you reading that garbage? Why are you looking at that trash? Oh, I'm just interested. There's a way that they describe it. It's a morbid fascination. It's a morbid fascination. This is nothing to be fascinated about. This is sick. This is sick. I love the way China deals with things. In China, I read about Chinese serial killers. Very little on them. You know why there's such little information about Chinese serial killers? Because the Chinese government doesn't allow those people to become famous. There's a brief biography. He was born on this date. He was born in this part of China. He killed this many people. He was arrested, found guilty. He was executed on this day. That's the way it needs to be. But in America, we make celebrities out of serial killers, and then we don't really enact any serious justice on them. And then we have a whole society being fascinated with them. America is a sick society. We are a very sick society. And people, why don't you leave America? Okay, so let me get this straight. If somebody actually gives you a legitimate criticism of your country, your reaction is to tell that person to leave. In other words, you're happy living in the muck. You're happy living in the crazy house. I'm not happy living in the crazy house. That's why I'm telling you guys these things, to make people think, because people don't really realize how sick the society that they live in is. We are like fish. The last thing we know is that we're wet. We don't know that we're wet. So somebody needs to tell you that you're wet. I'm here to tell you you're wet. Your society sucks. I mean, America has some great things. We have free refills. We got fast food, the best restaurant service in the world, excellent grocery stores. But my God, we have some very, very disturbing scenarios of violence that happen every single year in this country, and no one gives a damn. Nobody cares. We had a massacre in Connecticut. A family was butchered, the Petit family massacre, and they were literally people protesting, religious people from the Catholic Church probably. I know there were some people from the Episcopalian Church, religious people coming to defend the murderers who did this. It's beyond me. It's so sick. It's sick. It's sick. I'm not saying America is the only country that's sick, but we are a very sick society. Anyway, I've talked long enough. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.